Sorry?
Shots.
You have to have.
Yeah, okay, it's already still. Yeah, well, I was saying it, but I was like. Cool. Just to like.
I should say this.
As we come, we each get like. We're doing program properly. We get a small investment. Sure. Get them up there. Well, that in the membership, like once you double, once you get there, you got what else? Talking about it. That's like. That's almost a billion dollars. And everything. Oh,
Everywhere's going against its ladder, so it's like it's all like yeah.
You need the numbers.
It's instead of spending. Yeah, like that's where we got it. Yeah. That's cool. I was surprised. I didn't like
I'm recording as well.
Oh,
We have two
yeah.
things. Nice, I see it there. Is that yours? Oh, that's why. That's why it was over. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll need this too. So
Good. Yes.
Oh, there we go. Okay, just a few minutes more before we get into our panel. So if our panel members can eat really quickly and don't choke, please. I don't have my first aid, but I'm sure there's somebody in the room that could help. So I'll give you a 2-minute warning. All right. How was that meal while everyone's still eating? So I'd like to thank the staff at Doubletree for preparing such a delicious meal and helping us today cater for you guys. I hope the food was to your liking because the few bites that I had were great. And I will enjoy it afterwards, but I would like to start the funding panel. So I'm gonna list off our panelists who are joining us today, and hopefully they're in the room. And if they're not, they'll join us as soon as they can. We have Keith Martell from First Nations Bank of Canada and Jamie Schweitzer with who is the Chief Investment Officer for Westcap Management Limited, and Jesse Weeb, the Saskatchewan lead for Startup TNT, and Brandon Mans, the Senior Business Officer, Community Economic Development and External Relations for Prairies Can. So we have our moderator today. We have Michelle Keeley. She is one of KPMG Regina Advisory Services Manager and a member of the firm's Global Infrastructure Advisory Practice. She earns a diploma in architectural technology, a designation of project management profession, and a Master of Business Administration in executive leadership, and studied Indigenous procurement and developed an Indigenous procurement framework as part of her MBA research project. And please don't mind, continue eating as we go. We'll just treat it as a lunch meeting. So we're all used to those anyways. So I'll call up our panelist and moderator to the stage, please. Sorry. You have to eat something.
No, that's okay.
Very good. Used to it.
Thank you. And the mics are ready to go.
Thank you, Annie, for that wonderful introduction. And please do continue eating. I would love this to be a lunch and learn. I'd first just like to acknowledge the elder for helping us start today in a positive way with their opening prayer. I'd like to acknowledge Mayor Masters for her humbleness and sharing her reconciliation journey today. FHQ for putting this wonderful event together. It's always so powerful when we can have the opportunity to have so many people in a room and come together and grow together. I'd also like to acknowledge Graham for the wonderful lunch. Thank you for sponsoring. And last, I would like to acknowledge the panelists for their time today traveling to educate us on this lunch and learn on Indigenous funding and financing. So with that, let's talk money. Do we have the deck? And if not, that's fine. Thanks. All right. So the theme we're hoping to cover today is talking about how Indigenous peoples and businesses can revitalize access to capital to build economic capacity and prosperity. To kick us off, I would like our panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves and their organization and the different funding opportunities for Indigenous businesses and individuals. Keith, I will start with you. He is the CEO of the First Nations Bank of Canada and the first Canadian chartered bank to be independently controlled by Indigenous stakeholders.
Thanks. Thanks for the organizers. I think this is a great conference. I was here this morning and really good content that I hope we don't disappoint. I'll notice that there's no females in this panel, so it's not going to be as good as any of the other panels that's been we've had yet today. So I just wanted to set expectations and lower them a little bit. So I'm the CEO of First Nations Bank of Canada. I've been in that job for 26 years and 5 months, and I will be in that job for about another 45 days. So I'm about to retire at the end of April and turn over the keys of a successful Indigenous owned chartered bank to another individual who's going to carry it forward, Bill Lomax. So we are a chartered bank. So we provide on the financial services side, transactional services for businesses of any size, First Nations governments, First Nations economic development enterprise, Inuit organizations, Métis organizations. Our main focus is Indigenous business. 90% of our business volume is Indigenous business on the transaction side, and 90% of our volume of Indigenous business on the lending side is Indigenous business, Indigenous governments, and Indigenous individuals. So that's the only business we're in. We're a chartered bank, so the kind of things we offer on this capital continuum is the loan debt stuff. It is primarily, bank debt. It's commercial debt, so it's debt that is not startup capital. It's not equity. It really is your banker providing you a loan, short-term, long-term, structured finance deals if that fits your deal, but it's really the debt piece. And I think we're going to talk today about the range of capital that a First Nation ECDEV organization or a First Nation entrepreneur needs and where we fit in. But I think it's really important to know the whole continuum because you have to talk to the right players to get the right access to capital. So that's what we do. Personally, I'm from the Waterhen Lake First Nation. I've been in finance and accounting and First Nations business for too long. So it's been a really long time, most of my career, but I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I will miss the day-to-day activity. But as I told somebody earlier, in retirement, I'll continue to work with people I like on projects I like. So I won't disappear. So.
Thank you, Keith. Jesse, off to you.
Yeah, happy to be here. I was already in town, so it was nice to come and join this event. And kind of cap off an amazing week, an investment, which maybe I'll get into later on in the panel. Myself, Jesse, I'm from Treaty 6 territory near Langham. I grew up on a farm out there. And I mentioned that because I work with my dad, who was a farmer and made our money through farming, and we do investing now. We started what's known as a family office in this space, taking a concerted effort and a structured approach to investing our capital personally. And through that, we discovered this organization here, Startup TNT. I got all the swag on today. Lots of shameless plugs for this. What Startup TNT does, we're a nonprofit organization based out of Edmonton, but operating in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And we build community and we invest in early stage companies. Our motto is have fun, make friends, build companies. And the TNT actually stands for Thursday Night Tradition. So every Thursday we meet in the community. It's open to anybody. You just come out here in Regina. It's at Cathedral Social Hall. In Saskatoon, it's at Rook and Raven Pub. Just show up and meet people. And ideally, we're thinking around startups, right? And when people think, there's entrepreneurs, and then we call them founders when we talk about startups, because you can be an entrepreneur and you can start a business, but it doesn't mean that you have a startup. At least how we define it. How we define startups means that you have to be looking to scale globally, ideally, but maybe even starting like I want to scale across the prairies, right? You're not just doing a mom and pop shop on Main Street in downtown Regina. You're building a company that's going to have a bigger footprint than that. And those are the type of companies that we look to invest in, right? Us and Westcap, we're kind of operating in relatively similar. We're a little earlier. We're known as angel investing, right? So we're on that far side of that continuum. And we operate a model we call an investment summit, which is what culminated last night. In fact, a company from here in Regina called Farm Simple won a prairie-wide ag tech investment summit contest. I should say contest. It was a deal screening process. And it's a real investment. We invested on actual terms. We negotiated terms with this company. And it was like Dragon's Den, like live on stage. It was very exciting. And we're going to be doing that again coming up here. Applications are now open. So any young entrepreneurs in the room that are interested in raising capital from angel investors, you can apply right now, just on our website, startuptnt.com. And our investors, they each pre-commit $5,000. In fact, Thomas did this with our partners at Valhalla a couple of years ago before I even joined the organization. So he's familiar with the model. And what it does is it really helps build up the community and gives an opportunity for the entrepreneurs to learn best practices because they get feedback even if they don't get investment. And for investors that are wanting to invest in this type of asset class, provides an opportunity for them to learn best practices. We bring in folks like Wanda from Westcap has come in and done education sessions and teach our investors how the pros do it, right? So it's a great opportunity. And I really am excited here to come and talk about it and talk more about what we're doing.
Thanks, Jesse. Great segue into Jamie. Can you tell us about yourself, your role, and Indigenous opportunities for funding and financing?
For sure. Thank you for having me. Keith, congratulations. A few more days left with us. Westcap Management, I'm the Chief Investment Officer. We're a bit of a unique capital provider in the sense that most fund managers are typically either private equity, which is closer to the banking side of the continuum, or venture capital, which is closer to the angel and startup side. And through the various funds that we manage under Westcap, we can really cross over a good portion of that equity continuum. Our main pools of capital, Golden Opportunities Fund, which some of you may be familiar with. It's a retail fund that any individual can participate in. You can get a tax credit for it, buy it into your RSP. And that fund itself is it's industry agnostic, it's life stage agnostic, so we can do everything from early stage $50,000 to $250,000 investments. If you're an entrepreneur, a founder with a startup concept or idea, we can participate at that early stage, all the way through to more traditional private equity growth transition type equity participation. Degelman Industries here in Regina is a great example. We partnered with the Degelman family on an exit back in 2019. We also manage more traditional LPGP private equity funds. We've raised 3 consecutive funds since 2014, 57 million on the first one, 100 million on the second, and most recently we raised 285 million back in 2022 for our third fund. And then I guess our most recent active placement capital would be, and that was announced last week. It's Connect Manitoba. It's a growth fund coming out of Manitoba. It's been many years since that capital market ecosystem has had an injection of active capital for placing. And we're really excited about participating in that geography as well and moving forward. Historically, I see a fair number of familiar faces in the room. Westcap Management had been directly involved with a lot of First Nation economic development. We were the fund manager for the First Nation Métis Fund. We also were the founders and developers of the Bridge program, Business Readiness Investment Development Gateway. So again, it's nice to see everyone here. This is something that we're passionate about at Westcap, and look forward to hopefully working again together with many of you in the future.
Thank you, Jamie. Now going one notch left on the continuum, we have Brendan Mans from Prairies Economic Development Canada.
Thank you. Mentioned about having a woman on this panel. I am filling in for our director, Arla Cameron, our director of community economic development and external relations. So she sends her regrets today, but that's where I'm filling in here for that. So at Prairies Canada, we support growth and diversification of the prairie economy. I'm part of the new community economic development team here in Saskatchewan. Prairies Canada has gone through a transition since it was WD. Most people know it as Western Economic Diversification. It's changed in the last number of years. And one thing it did is developed a new community economic development division, and it allowed us having a new offices in Prince Albert and here in Regina. I'm based here in Regina, along with my colleague Kirsten, who's at the back of the room here. It allowed Prairies Canada to have a little more outlet, a little more grassroots, a little bit. My job is basically get out and to meet with people and meet in communities and identify opportunities and challenges and how Prairies can maybe help with those. We have four sort of major roles that Prairies Can does. One is obviously investor. That's what people know us for, is in investing and supporting those major economic development projects across Saskatchewan. Another is convener. What we're able to do is kind of be that a little bit of a consulting role and come in and bring groups together. Again, within this province, we don't have a strong funded provincial economic development system. It's kind of left up for communities to kind of do economic development on their own. We were able to come in there and look regionally, look beyond your community, look within your community and bring those stakeholders together. Obviously, advisor is another role. Again, I'm 20 years of economic development experience and tourism experience within the province, wherever we can do to help in that area. And then, of course, is pathfinding. It's a very major role that we play in this space. We know with even our own programs, which I'll be talking about here in a second, they're very complicated. Where do you start? You go onto a Government of Canada website, they're not easy to navigate. Again, also for us, we can work with our other agency partners like ISK, Ag and Food. There's numerous economic development divisions within the federal government. So again, where do you start? You start with calling people like myself and to help navigate those situations. Some priorities for 23-24 that Prairies Can is looking at. We have our budget dropping on Tuesday, so we'll see if this changes. But as of now, I don't think it's going to change too much. But new value and competitiveness, looking to fund and energize those new innovations and improve prairie competitiveness and improve our competitiveness here in Saskatchewan. And our major sectors we don't think are going to be changing, and that's value-added ag, health and biosciences, clean energy, clean resources, advanced manufacturing, natural resources and critical minerals, digital tech, and of course, inclusiveness. So, making sure that everybody is represented well within our economy. As far as our actual funding programs, we have three core funding programs. Business Scale Up and Productivity, our BSP program. And so this is more geared toward for-profit companies and those with real high yielding growth companies for 20% year-over-year growth. Those are the companies that we like to engage with and really help and really advance their technologies that they're doing in that area. And that's a repayable loan. It's not a grant, but for those for-profit companies and up to $5 million. our Community Economic Development and Diversification Fund. So this is a fund for more your community not-for-profits, your educational institutions, your economic development teams within your community for projects that support economic growth and diversity in your community. So it's a wide-ranging type of program. It's non-repayable, so it is a grant. And for many of our programs, we like to see sort of 50% funding as well come to the table. And it helps us. For Indigenous groups, we do look at funding 100% of those opportunities. But again, if there's other capital and other funds that are brought to the table within that application, we like to see that. And the other one is our Regional Innovation Ecosystem, or RIE fund. And again, those are a lot of these innovation hubs, those sector groups that we can kind of help bring together.
You fund us, actually.
Exactly. I was about to say there is numerous people who have taken advantage of these programs here in the room. Again, happy to engage with you guys around that. But again, talk to your counterparts around here, and hopefully you have some positive stories about
Very
working
positive.
working with
You
parents.
just gave us even more money. It's great.
Like this guy. So again, so it just supports that ecosystem, those startups, those accelerators. I think we funded the SIIT accelerator recently as well. So again, these projects are very important to us. So again, with our new team here on the ground, we're able to connect with you and kind of hopefully make some sense of these federal programs that are out there.
Thank you. So our next question, I think I want to start at the far left with venture. Sorry, that's my left. You're right with venture capital. When Indigenous organizations or individuals are looking for capital, what are the pros and what are the cons for working with an organization like yours, or the different types of capital you have access to or work with?
Sure. I'll go, and Jesse, jump in when you want. Let's start with the cons, which is an obvious one. If you bring in venture capital partners such as yourself, it's not for free, and we're going to want something back. So we're going to want some ownership in your company. And that really just breaks down to the fundamentals of, if we don't create some type of economic return for the capital we're investing, we will no longer exist and the whole ecosystem fails. So please have the expectation that when you come to us for a partnership, there is going to be an equal and opposite ask, and we're going to take some ownership in your company. This is where I think it segues into a lot of really good pros. When you partner with a VC firm or a capital provider, really of any kind, you're just starting to build out your knowledge network. And when you're first starting out, I often say that one of the key things that you learn from partnering with VC isn't necessarily the right answers or the right path, but it's the knowledge of all the failures that we've had, the cumulative things the lessons that we've learned through different investments, different companies. We can help direct you, save you time, get you going down the right path. And when you're in the early stages of development and starting your company, you're very fortunate if you can come out of the gate generating revenue and capital for yourself. But most times it's a prolonged period of burn. You're having to spend money to develop your market, to develop your product, to get your name known. And anything that you can do to learn and avoid mistakes that are going to shorten that time period of burn and get you to positive cash flow sooner is going to be very, very profitable for you. And access to our network of other CEOs at work, access to our network of potential customers that you might be looking for. I think, one of the biggest pros I would say is just that network and knowledge that we've gained through working with numerous other companies just like yours over the years.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I'd actually just add on to kind of both sides of the points, pros and cons. So on the con side, something I think that needs to be mentioned, particularly in this room, is if you're getting capital from most traditional venture capitalists, it's very colonialist still, right? And you're giving up a portion of your company to, and the people who are going to get the reward at the end of the day, when you ideally make it to that mountaintop, isn't going to be the people that are around you. It's going to be the people from outside your community, right? And so you have to be careful, about who you're letting in. And a lot of these people could also potentially, they're not everybody's nice in the venture capital world. There are some predatory people out there, right? And you've got to be careful about them. They'll come in and they'll steal your company out from under you, right? And you got to be like, there's good reason to be careful about that. Ideally, like the people here on the stage, we're not those people, but there are lots of them out there. And I hear horror stories all the time. So you do need to be careful about who you take your money from and what they're bringing to the table. But that said, if you do find on the pro side, as Jamie said, if you find the right partner, right? If you find a partner that understands what you're trying to build and has the same vision as you, right? No matter where they're from, right? What their background is, that's a rewarding relationship that'll go both ways, right? And you'll end up building a much better company and a better, brighter future for yourselves and for your community by partnering with the right person, right? And adding on to that point about mistakes, the other thing as well that venture capital and investors around your table, we operate sort of in the angel investors really early, just getting off the ground. We start to give you that horizontal view. You as a founder and entrepreneur, when you're building a business, you have to have deep domain expertise. You're vertical, right? That's what they call it, verticals. You're deep down, you understand everything that's happening within your industry. I can't do that. I can't understand everything in a particular industry. I got too many other things on the go. I'd have to understand enough that I can ask good questions, but my job is to take the horizontal view and give you the peripherals. So when something is coming down the pipeline that you might not see coming, I can make you aware of it before it hits you, right? Before you get T-boned going through an intersection, right? That's what good venture capital and good investors can do for you, right? They can give you that horizontal vision and also take lessons from other companies they're working with and be like, well, this worked over here. Why don't we try something similar over here? Right. And I've done that multiple times with companies and helps move them along. And you can take a timeline learning curve that would take 6 to 12 months and do it in a month. Right. It speeds you up. That's what venture capital does. It buys you time. That's what you're doing. When you're taking the investment, you're buying time. You're instead of spending all this time figuring it out on your own, you're buying our experience, right? And our knowledge. That's the pro side.
Just quickly, if I can, one other piece I would mention is as you start to partner with institutional capital, venture capital, angel investors, although we're on the kind of the bottomy end of that capital continuum, we're really an important domino in that whole capital structure, because once you secure that equity investment and you have that equity capital on your balance sheet, we really act as a way of unlocking additional ease for senior bank. And you always want to get as much of that cheap investment capital as you can. And we as black-hearted capitalists want you to do the same thing because it leverages everybody's returns. Get as much cheap capital as you can, grant capital, and having an equity partner on your balance sheet really is that, like I said, that first domino that falls and unleashes some of that extra capital that can come in and bring down your overall cost of capital.
Thanks. Keith, I'd like you to answer that question as well of pros and cons of the type of capital that you're involved in, but I'm also curious if you could share how businesses could know or should know what type of capital to be seeking.
Yeah, those are great questions. So, the capital continuum is complex. And even if you look at debt, there's probably, 6 sort of fundamental varieties of debt. So it's not just all capital. And, I do get frustrated with Indigenous entrepreneurs sometimes, and even Indigenous Sec Dev Corps, because they just sort of say, we need capital. It's like, well, how many pounds of capital do you want? Like, what kind of capital do you want? Like, what's the business investment? What's the term of this? How much equity are you willing to give up? How much are you willing to pay? And it is a combination of all the types of capital you need. And, if you break down that capital continuum, there's really 2 kinds. There's equity and there's debt. There's stuff that is owner-like in nature, and there's stuff that is not owner-like, but you pay a fixed rate on, and that's what debt is, and that's what we offer. But it takes that equity part to unleash debt. And the more low-cost debt you want, the more equity you're going to have, because bankers don't have the capacity to take risk on your business. I'll just give you a quick example. If we lend 100% of an entrepreneur's business, we lend all of the capital, all the money they need to operate the business at a fixed rate. If they're highly successful, we get paid 6%. That's it. If they go bankrupt, we lose all of the capital. And so we need that cushion between the debt and the owner, and that's that equity part. And there's two kinds of equity. There's free equity and there's equity that has a carried interest. The carried interest is the venture capital companies. If you want to become really big and do a public share offering, they'll want a return. They'll want capital growth in the stock. They'll want dividends. The free equity starts with you as the individual or the First Nation economic development enterprise, whether it's monies from your trust that you can use to capitalize your ActDev organization. If you're an individual, it's, you've been working in a business for many years, you've got money saved in your home, and you can put some of that up against your idea to take that business you've been doing for others and turn it into your own business. That's your own equity. And then there's other kinds of equity. And, we've named it before. Government grants are technically equity. They're typically non-repayable. There's no carry, there's no interest on them. And they become yours if you do the right things over a period of time. And then there's the most expensive equity for family Christmas gatherings. It's money from your parents, your aunts, or your uncles. Mm-hmm. That's free. It seems free, but it comes with unlimited advice and infinite guilt. So you just have to be careful. There's no equity as free other than the stuff that you own. But if you own a home and you're going to tell your spouse you're going to put all that equity in your home up to start a new business, you better make sure that he or she is supportive of that new business, because you're putting a lot of the, one of your most costly kinds of equity. It's your livelihood, it's your future, it's your kids' future. So it's a combination of both is frankly the answer. And there's no easy answer. If you can get enough equity and you have enough experience, you can get cheap debt. And cheap debt is good because it leverages your return on a business. And it's just simple math. And if you do it, I can give you a spreadsheet that does it. But if you can make a 12, 15% return on equity on a business, and you can borrow money from us at 6%, you get the spread between the 6 and the 12, and you can leverage your return. And banks will lend you money, but they need to have two things in consideration: that you've got the capacity, you've got that knowledge depth to run the business, and you've got the equity that can cushion the gives and takes. And in the early days of a business, when you're just starting out, you need more equity, you need more of that risk cushion, because things happen in new businesses. Things don't go always as planned. So it's a combination of all the above. So when you look at that capital continuum, how do you decide what you need? If you're an ActDev corporation, I always give that good example, is you often partner with other businesses. You partner with other construction companies or mining companies. And I always tell First Nations Economic Development Enterprise or Inuit ActDev Corps, look what your partners are using as capital and try and mirror that, because they're using a capital stack that makes sense for their business. And if you're in partner with them, look at how much equity they have, look at how much debt they use, look at the kind of debt they use. If you're doing a hydro development project, your typical partner is probably going to use structured debt, long-term bonds to finance the hydro deal. You shouldn't be financing your ownership portion of a hydro deal with a short-term loan. It just won't work. So look at your partners as a good example, and then seek advice. Like, if people come to banks and they often think that when we reject a loan, that's done, close the door, slam the door, get mad at the bank. But often we'll tell you what you need to run your business. We'll tell you how much equity you need. And so if you listen carefully, even to a rejection, you'll often find out that we were telling you exactly what the capital stack has to look like for your business. And then if you come back with the right capital stack, you'll get a yes to the debt part. So get advice from people who consultants are, sorry to consult. Consultants or brokers are terrible because they'll promise you the world and they'll deliver nothing, and they'll still get a fee for delivering nothing. But talk to people. If you go to these guys and they say, look, you need to have more debt, they know that. If we tell you need more equity, we know that. So listen to people who aren't getting paid to tell you what they want you to hear.
Thank you for making that point. I wanted to just add really quickly onto that. When we're talking to founders and entrepreneurs, and I'm sure the same is with Jamie and even with Prairie Scan, we're looking for that sweet spot where you're going to raise the right amount of capital and equity, right? That you're not going to get out too much of your company, and you're going to get enough that you need. But then we always ask a question during due diligence: what is your debt? Like, are you going to leverage any of this with debt, and are you going to leverage it with a granting strategy? Right? There are tons of grants out there, especially if you're doing like some sort of technology startup that matches the priority areas that you just said. So that's going to be, you have to be thinking about that. And as you said, having those conversations with all three groups, right, to kind of get a sense of what's possible from all three groups, and then coming up with that sweet spot number where you get enough money from all three sources to do what you're trying to do, right?
Okay. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Keith, for that advice. If I had $1 for every time that I spent my auntie's gift money, I would be rich. No, in all seriousness, really appreciate that advice. It's certainly helpful for myself and hopefully others in the room. So staying on that notion, Brendan, I'll ask, what are some of the things that businesses or individuals can do to more effectively move themselves through funding processes?
Right. So again, with Prairies Can, again, kind of the first step is to engage with our team, reach out to us, get us involved early. Regarding our actual funding programs, our core funding programs, as I mentioned, don't have a date attached to them. They're ongoing intakes. So again, we don't sit here, we have a whole bunch of money, let's get it out by March 31st or whatever the date is, and everybody's rushing to get their applications in. Our core funding, it's a little more stable. Engage with us, how we move you into those roles a little bit. Again, and most of our programs are sort of a two-step application process. So one is sort of an expression of interest, engage with us, kind of feel out the waters a little bit, and we can kind of guide you accordingly. And then if we feel that it is reaching the point where, yeah, we will make a successful application, that's when we actually engage with you guys to actually make that full application. So again, engage with us early and often. I also mentioned that sort of 50% number that, again, for Indigenous projects, we do fund up to 100%. But again, if you can have your partners at the table, if you can do that due diligence around and have the other dollars possibly available and that plan straightforward, that's really going to help expedite the process. Talking about cons, when it comes to the federal government, we know things like this take time. And we're aware that we're working with efficiencies within our internally to get money out the door faster to people. But we know that an application can come in, and we know there's frustration out there that how it can sit and take some time for it to actually check kind of gets into your bank account. So and unapproved. But that's again, just engage with us, get you into the funnel, and we can take it from there.
So I'm taking the lead from Jesse and I'm interfering on something, but I just wanted to add a point on that. I think an entrepreneur or an dev corp, when they go to government for grant money, it's really important to a lot of First Nations business developments, because government's very supportive of Indigenous economic development, which is great. But I always warn First Nations organizations or entrepreneurs, make sure that it's your priority when you're going to the government, not that they're bringing priorities to you, because we've seen that dead end happen so many times. The government 10 or 15 years ago had a strategy through Aboriginal Business Canada to really finance export, because they thought export was really important. They thought First Nations business development would really benefit from exporting a ton. But I'd say at the time, there was probably maybe 3 export-ready businesses in Canada. And so they spent a pile of money just pushing people to try and do export, and those businesses failed because it wasn't their priority, it was government's priority. So I love government, but I like to keep them at arm's length, and they really need to make sure that they're funding your priority, not that you're trying to make their priority relevant. And then the other thing that you're not going to get from government funding, which I don't think any government department would dispute, is the kind of knowledge that you talked about, that connection and knowledge of business. They're bureaucrats, which is great. I love bureaucrats. But at the end of the day, they don't run a business. So it's really hard for them to really give you advice or connections or those experiences that will help make you successful. And you get that from other sources of capital. So it's really important in your stack, but make sure you know where it fits and make sure it's your priority, not theirs.
Maybe just to defend the government here real quick. There's one organization that I think all startups should try to work with, because they do actually have really great advice, because I know the type of people that they bring in. That's NRC IRAP's program, right? The ITAs there. Honestly, I don't think there's a single company at TNT we've invested in that hasn't had IRAP, right? And in fact, it's a box we check during due diligence, and if they don't have it, it starts to set up a red flag. It's like, why isn't IRAP interested in this, right? Because if it's a startup with any sort of innovation around it, they'll put some backing behind it, and they can give you all kinds of different grants, for hiring, especially young people, into your company, covering like 80% of the salary. And as I said, like the people they bring in are like people that have done actual work in industry, often for decades. And they provide good advice. So that's the one caveat I maybe say to, to that.
I was probably almost exclusively talking about Indian ISC, so Indigenous Services Canada.
Thank you. So what I get from that is do your research.
Yeah, yeah.
Jamie, can you talk to us about how businesses can position themselves to be market attractive?
Absolutely. So buckle up because I can really geek out on this stuff. Okay. With banks and with government programs, there's defined processes, there's applications, there's ways to a pathway of getting through. The double-edged sword when you're seeking capital from an equity provider, a VC provider, is there is no application, there is no roadmap. It's really, we're just trying to assess if you have a good idea. And you know, Jesse has his motto of making friends,
Have fun, make friends, build companies.
build companies. We're a bit more staunchy in our company, but it's the same principle. We manage money, but we invest in people. Full stop. From our perspective, when Keith, when you're lending from a senior bank, and although there's all different kinds of debt, most of the time there's an asset or something that they're lending against, they can secure against, and that's their security. We're purely investing in you. And to come back to the pros of working with venture capital, when you guys succeed, we succeed, but when you stumble, we stumble with you. We are truly shoulder to shoulder and only do as well as you do. So when you're preparing to seek capital from us, and this sounds like a really basic, maybe shouldn't even have to say first starting point, but know your ask. It's surprising how many groups that I'll meet with on a daily basis when they're making a pitch, and I'll come out of an hour meeting and I'm really not sure what the ask was. I'm not sure what their business concept is. What's the ask? So make sure you can clearly define what's your product, what's your service, how are you going to differentiate yourself from your competitors? Is there a really need for what you're doing in the market? And again, most importantly, what I'm going to be looking for, what I'm going to be listening for, do you have the right team in place? Are you aligned with me? Are you all kind of pushing in the same direction? And my assessment, again, those are kind of 4 key things I'm looking for, but I keep wanting to emphasize the people, because so often in early stage financing, the initial product, service, concept that you bring to the table over the life cycle of actually getting it commercialized and getting it to market, it could change 1, 2, 3, 4 different times. You hit a block, you pivot, you move. And that's why the people behind it is so important. Do you have the right group of people that can be managing that? So I think, to Keith's concept as well of don't kind of take direction of where you think you want to fit. Where do you truly fit? Where are you going to add value, and what can be the best case for you?
Yeah, I love that so much. And one of the things I just want to add on quick and plug in TNT here, because what you might be asking yourself is like, how do I figure that out? Right? Like, where do I go to figure that out? And TNT, and the reason why Prairie Scan funds that is we fill that gap, right? The Thursday night tradition every week, you come to that. That's a friendly environment where you can ask questions, right? You can meet other entrepreneurs, you can meet investors, you can have these conversations, right? And then you can apply to the investment summit. You come through the program, and even if you're not successful, you will get feedback. Something I've been saying a lot this week when I was talking to people about TNT and the summit is that no matter what, as a founder or an entrepreneur, you always have 2 customers, right? You have the customers actually buying your product, and then you have the investors or the capital sources buying your business model, right? And what we tell entrepreneurs is when you're building a product, get it into the hands of your customers as fast as possible and start to iterate, right? And we talk about that only on the product side, but we need to talk about that on the capital source side as well, right? If you want to build a business that's actually going to be fundable and grow it, right? You need to get your business model in the hands of your customers, which means going and talking to people like us here on the panel and other people here in the community, people like Thomas, right? And saying, here's what I'm thinking in terms of business model. And he goes, oh, no, that's probably not going to work. But if you tried this, maybe you should pivot over here. Right. And then you try something else. And that's what you keep figuring out. And then eventually, once you figure that out, then you can come and actually get the money. Right. Because now we're like, oh, yeah, this will work. Right. This, like, we all agree this works. Let's put some money on this rocket ship and, you know, get it fueled and get it going. Right. So that's how we operate with Startup TNT, is we provide that service to the community. That's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Thank you. For a minute there, I felt like I was on Shark Tank. So we had some interesting conversations kind of off the record yesterday on this one. The culture of capital is changing. We all know interest rates are increasing. Inflation is higher than ever. Avocados cost like $5 a piece. Question to any of my panelists who would like to answer this. How has this dynamic market impacted the average individual or business when seeking capital?
So I can start because I'm the banker and we're interest driven. So yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's actually good for our business. Margins have been at an all-time historic low for banks. So I know nobody ever felt sorry for banks during that time, but we're doing a lot better now that interest rates are higher. I think that, you know, getting that selfish thing aside, I think the real difference with rising interest rates is it's going to make it harder for bad decisions to look good, if that's a good analogy. So when money was basically free, if you could get a government grant, you could go to some government lending organization, get money for 2% and go to the bank and get more money for 3.5%. You had a lot of ability to make a ton of mistakes and still survive. Whereas now that interest rates, costs are higher because you got a fixed interest rate, the sharper businesses are going to survive. And I know that's not a good thing to say to the people who had a weak business plan, but it's a good thing to say for the economy, that now you're going to have to pay for equity. And if you have to pay for equity, you got to perform and you got to have better financial performance. Now, if you're in a sector that sells avocados, the good thing about avocado prices going up is that your margins, even if they're still 10%, it's more money because 10% of $6 is bigger than 10% of $4. So those things, there's advantages to it. But if you were sitting there relying on a business plan that relied on cheap, virtually free money from almost everybody, and the economy just sort of continuing to grow exponentially, unfortunately, those days are over. But I think in these times, I think we strengthen the ability of our economic enterprises to do better in the long term, because cheap money and easy times make for lazy opportunities. Shall I say it?
It protects mediocrity.
It protects mediocrity. There we go. Protects mediocrity. So I guess that's sort of a lesson. I know there's a lot of Indigenous economic development corps out there who are just hitting their stride. I don't think any of them are in danger. They're in a time right now where there's great opportunity. And as long as you're really an operator, as long as you're really providing capacity and you've got some equity, you'll continue to do really well. And I think it's going to take a lot of the mediocre players out of the market, and it's going to make opportunities for those really good performers to do even better.
Yeah, I think that's very, very well said. And interest rates have gone up, but for those of us with gray hair, no hair, they're not that high right now. And from that perspective, I think in our industry, Keith hit the nail on the head. You're probably just going to have to take a little bit more equity. Good news is with inflation and compressed earnings, valuation, you're probably not going to have to give up as much of your company. But yeah, I think the debt stack will shift a little bit, especially if you're an earlier stage company. It's not going to impact you, I don't think, a whole lot as we move forward.
Well, these are great points. So one area I'll maybe add a little more silver lining on this is around the employment piece and building your company. Because of this market that we're entering into, the bigger companies in my sector, we think about, Vendasta, 7 Shifts up in Saskatoon, or for Indigenous lands, you got Bobby Reset with Virtual Gurus out of Calgary. They're starting to slow down in terms of like their hiring because they need to maintain their cash. right? They know that this is a tough capital environment, which means they're not hiring like, usually they're hiring like the prime people and they're paying high rates, you know, $180,000 a year was what some of the devs were getting at 7 shifts, right? And so that makes it hard if you're just getting started and you're trying to build a technology company, right? Trying to build an app or something like that, and you can't hire the talent. Well, guess what? The talent's now there looking for a job, and they're willing to be like, you know what? You can only pay me $40,000 a year, but I'm going to get a bunch of equity in this company. And this company has a lot of potential. So I'm going to come on board and help you build it. Right. And so that's the environment we're now in. And so that's where the positive side is like it's for the good ideas. And this is why I really like that you guys pointed out, like, you know, about the hiding the bad ideas. Those ones are not going to get funded. But if you have a really good idea and a great company, it's actually going to get easier in some ways. Right. Because everyone's going to be and also the capital is really looking and scanning and only focusing in on the good ones. Right. And also because those bigger companies, and some of these companies we were talking about this last night, are raising, you know, 2-year rounds, 3-year rounds. Usually it's like a year and a half on average, the cycle for a company to keep raising capital, at least in venture, right? Which means if they're raising 3 years at a time, that means there's that much time where other people can raise instead, right? To freeze up more capital flow, because it's all about flow, right? Like that's what we talk about in venture and private equity, because it's a little lumpy and we flow it in chunks throughout the year, and it's along a timeline. Right. And that's going to get a little easier as well. So those are some silver linings.
Awesome. Brendan, anything to add?
Not really. Just from our perspective, we're seeing some challenges, obviously, is around, like, say, community projects and infrastructure and things like that, where we do support. Again, applications come in and we say, yeah, we're on board to fund this. By the time the money gets out the door, the cost to develop that project has gone up by 5, 10, 15%, depending on the raw material that may be needed around that project. So that's something that we're definitely trying to identify, and just making sure that we are engaging with the proponent throughout the process, so that we know that we can account for these changes as it happen.
Thank you.
Sorry, just one thing I want to warn, especially First Nations entrepreneurs or ACTEV organizations, is because we're highly reliant a lot of times on government grant revenue. And if I've heard one times, I've heard a dozen times in Ottawa in the last few weeks that the budget in March 28th is going to be an austerity budget. And, you know, that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to spend less money on First Nations economic development support, but they're probably going to spend less money on almost everything. And so proportionately, if you're counting on government to be part of your equity stack, you know, that might get more difficult. So that's one of the I hate to be the downer. You give all the silver linings and I give all the down. I'm a banker, right? So we tell you the worst case scenario.
You still a good cop.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sending you a Christmas card, Keith.
Yeah. But that's something that I think Indigenous entrepreneurs should pay attention to, is it may get harder in the next few years if government deficits and interest rates stay high to get government funding. So that's a challenge.
Thank you. And yeah, just thank you all for all of that insight. It's very apparent you have a ton of experience in your roles, in your space. In our last, I think, 9 minutes that we're going to be closing in on here, wondering if you can reflect on an example or share any lessons learned or success stories that you have had in your role when working with Indigenous businesses or individuals.
I'll start with this one. First, so we've got a few ways that we think about it at Startup G&T. And I try to take a two-pronged approach. So on one prong, right, we need more strong entrepreneurs and founders, and we need to develop them, and we need to create resiliency in them and make sure they have the tools to just get off the ground, right? Like even just like building and like filing for incorporation documents and just getting all that stuff, basic stuff set up. So Thomas and I both sit on the advisory council with SIT's program, the Innovation Accelerator that Brendan mentioned. That is doing a lot of really, really great work. And I encourage everybody here to check it out and check out what they're doing, and encourage folks in your community to apply to that program. Because it's doing some amazing work, and it's only getting better as they go. And the hope is that they can take that program's model and take it across the country to other similar institutions. And I really hope that they can do that, because that's an important piece of the puzzle. And then the other piece of the puzzle, and then we got all the ECDEVs here in the room, and we're partnering with Saskatchewan Indigenous ECDEV Network on this. And I hope you guys can all come and join us on April 11th and 12th for an event that we're doing in partnership with SIDN. Because on the venture side, is like we need more ECDev investors that understand venture capital in their communities that don't look like me, right? That are actually from the communities that they invest in, people like Thomas, right? Because he came onto our program, he understood now, he did one investment with us, you're investing outside of your community the first time, it's only $5,000 to invest with Startup TNT, it's a $500 fee, and then we teach you. But my hope is that you can come into the program, and we've had a couple success stories with this. You come in and you learn, and then you can go back to your community. And now they've got both sides of the puzzle, right? There's the founders that are coming out, but they also need the mentors in the local community that, as I mentioned, can help shape that business model. It's people that you can go to that get it in your community, people like Keith, right? That can give you that good advice, right? And then ideally cut a check and get you off the ground, right? And that's what I hope to see out of events like this, and the event and the partnership that we're putting together with Sidon. And we've had some success too with the entrepreneurs coming in. We had our first Indigenous tech company come through last fall, Indigenous Cloud. They were in our top 20, and we were really excited to see that. And I'm hoping to see more, and to see more First Nations investors in our investor pool as well.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. I guess let me say two things before I share a success. Number one, I hope that even just exposure to hearing from the panelists up here, if you're a new company or a founder or an entrepreneur who's looking to start out, again, sometimes you don't even know what path to take, who to call, who can you talk to. Anyone up here, I think we're going to be sharing our contact information at the end. If we're not your right partner, if don't have the right answer, the capital market ecosystem in Regina, in Saskatoon, in Saskatchewan, in Western Canada, in North America, it is very small. We know a lot of people, and we can hopefully help you get to the right place. So if you take nothing else away from it, please take down a contact name. And if you have a question in the future, don't hesitate to reach out. From a success story, going back into our FNMF days, one of the first investments that we made was participating with FHQ Developments. We were partners in funding the joint venture between FHQ and Can Elson. And I remember it was 2012, I think, when we made that investment. Shortly after that happened, the oil and gas industry took a bit of a prolonged downturn. The oil patch really laid down almost all of the active rigs, but rig number 10, and I remember checking the stats, there were 14 rigs standing in southern Saskatchewan in 2014, and one of them was rig number 10. So it was a great partnership led by FHQ Developments. It continues to work with them. It passed down from Can Elson to Trinidad to Ensign. It was clearly a good deal. It was clearly a good agreement, a good partnership. And yeah, it's one of our favorite success stories to talk about.
Thank you. Brendan, off to you.
Yeah, I was thinking about any specifics. I think my comments will be a little bit more in general, and throughout my career and working as an economic development practitioner in communities right across Saskatchewan here. When it comes, my role is a little bit more on that community side and working those community projects. And what's great about working with Indigenous communities is within community economic development, there's kind of three kind of a stool of three prongs here. Obviously, there's the economic development side, jobs, growth, people moving into your community and that sort of thing. The other two sides are the environmental lay of the land and sustainability within your community, and the other is the social. And we kind of forget about that sometimes as economic developers. We kind of get down that path of bringing in the next company or bringing in that the big factory or whatever it may be. But with Indigenous communities, that they take care of each other. You talked about today about engaging youth. I think they do that better than anybody as well. They don't have the talent in their community. They will make sure they find somebody within it to get them educated and bring them up to speed. And then all of a sudden they're the future leaders. And we say that time and time again. And within our roles that we get to engage on directly with band offices, with economic development corps. We look at things like I've recently talked to a First Nation the other day about a funeral home opportunity, and just learning that most funeral homes just don't allow Indigenous ceremonies and different things to be undertaken. So again, to have an opportunity like that, however we can help. And I think it's just for us, the TNC 92 is just really for, to listen and action and see what we can do around it. Internally, like is another reason I wish Arla was sitting here right now. She's leading a Indigenous inclusion framework within our own organization. We need to do a better job. We need to better understand the needs of Indigenous people and how we engage. And again, just hats off to everybody in this room that are continuing to wave their flag for their community and for their business sakes. And again, we're going to be here to help and however we can engage and continue that on.
Awesome, thank you. Keith, can you finish us out with?
In 1 minute and 15 seconds. So I'll just use one example. So, clients don't like it when we come out and spill all the financial details of our customers on stage. So this is an example. They're a customer. I was on their trust board for about 14 years, and they've publicly said everything I'm going to say before. It's the Cold Lake First Nation. And, they settled a smallish claim in the early 2003. They had the wherewithal to understand that equity was really significantly important to changing their economic landscape. So they didn't distribute it all to all the community members. They kept a bunch of it to create community wealth, which was the seed capital for them to really start businesses and get moving along. So that was the first good decision, is getting some equity that is your own money and money that you can use to leverage opportunity. Second thing they did is they were in the oil and gas industry, but they did not succumb to the 51-49 rent to feather sort of operations. Those are derogatory terms that frankly, the oil and gas industry likes to use sometimes, because it's sort of like, partner with these guys. You don't really do any of the business, but we'll pay you something, a little bit of a premium in order to tell us we have Indigenous content. Cold Lake didn't do that. They hired their own people. They built their own companies. They partnered with others, but it was a technology and a capacity transfer. It wasn't a reliance issue. And wherever they had partners, they had the ability to take over those partners, not to simply be driven by those partners to give them a return and you got nothing. So they spent time on that. They had their own people running the business. Primco Dene is run by James Blackman. He's a big burly Dene guy, half Cree. So I think his smarts come from the Cree and his big burliness comes from the Dene side. I'm Cree. I always tell my Dene friends that, but he is a smart businessman. He's in the business. He's as respected in the industry as anybody in the industry, and that's important. They focus on, as a community and as a business, they focus on business sustainability as a support for social development, not trying to get social development accomplished by investing in businesses. And it's an important distinction. If you get sustainable businesses, they will create social economic opportunity because they hire people. They hire people with real jobs that don't go away. They create a long-term career. They build a business. And I used an example, I think, when I was talking to Thomas earlier today, after they paid off some old bills, that settlement that I talked about, it wasn't hundreds of millions of dollars. I think they had about $18 million left. And today their businesses that they've invested in with that capital they started produce almost $15 million of return to the community every year. So that's like one of those claims they had back in 2003. They get another one of those every year. And besides that money coming back to the community, which creates social opportunity, they also employ hundreds of their own people. In fact, they employ a lot of people from other communities, including Waterhen Lake First Nation, where I'm from. So they're really an economic driving engine for the region. And it's because they own their businesses, they run their businesses, they got proper equity and debt structures, and they're not dependent on government grants or other things to sort of limp along. They speed along. So that's a great success story that I think thought about capital in the right way in order to make the businesses successful.
That is a fantastic story. Thank you, Keith, Jesse, Jamie, and Brendan. That is it. Except for, I do want to drop one plug. AFOA Canada, by coincidence of being here, is developing a project financing micro certification course. We're looking for feedback on what types of learning material will best support economic development. So if there's anyone interested in taking a survey, please come visit me. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for that lovely panel. It was a lot of information, but it was good information to hear, because who doesn't want to hear about how to get money? No. So next on the line, we have the Indigenous ECDev panel that we coordinated with other Dev Corps in Saskatchewan, and we also have a visitor from Manitoba. So we would like to call up our panelists, Alex Fallon, who is the CEO of Pepeekisis First Nations newly formed Dev Corp, Sparrowhawk Developments Limited. And we have Mark Gettle, the CEO for Fishing Lake First Nation Ventures Limited. And then we have Grant Humphrey. He is the Vice President of Business Development at Spirit Healthcare Group. And I will also make mention of our moderator. Today is Josh Montana. He is from George Gordon First Nation, located in Treaty 4 territory of Saskatchewan. Josh completed an associate's degree in commerce and bachelor's degree in business administration, which he has spent the 6 years of his career applying in the oil, gas, potash, and renewable energy sector in Canada, where he has provided leadership in operations, engagement, governance, economic development, and Indigenous relations. In his current position as the Vice President of Stewardship and Relations at Wichitoak Limnos Consulting Services, he has been able to create meaningful relationships and meet tons of great people throughout the federal government, provincial government, multinational industry companies, Indigenous nations, and city councils. Josh believes in protecting and exercising Indigenous rights and has experienced success in creating Indigenous capacity and inclusion in the industries that he works in. And he's a pretty good baseball player too. So if you'd like to come up, panelist and moderator, and we can get this panel started. You can sit because there's
Yeah.
40, so we got
Okay.
without force. Yeah, no, good. Thank you. Right.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Annie, for that great introduction. She made me sound very important up here, so I hope I don't have big shoes to fill. But just want to welcome everybody here, and I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you, FHQ team, for having me here to moderate this panel. I'm excited to participate with all the great gentlemen up here, and we have everything kind of from healthcare, kind of in all the businesses. So we have a great diverse group up here. So with that, I'll pass it along to Mark, and we'll do a brief introduction and kind of the community that you're representing.
Mark Gettle. I'm representing Fishing Lake First Nation Ventures Limited. We're fairly new economic development corporation. Started out in 2015, but really haven't ramped up until the last 18 months or so. We have a huge opportunity out at BHP because of being designated one of the impacted First Nations in the area. So that gives us some opportunities, I guess, best way to experience it. I come from the Pepeekisis First Nation, so I'm actually an outsider when it comes to Fishing Lake. I was recruited by a very good friend of mine to come and help out and try and make a difference for their community. I started out as a carpenter, formed my own business, did that for quite a while, about 20 years, then moved on to SIT and worked within the training system, getting young people engaged in the trades. And we had lots of success with a lot of the big construction companies within the province. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thanks.
We'll keep going. So first of all, happy Friday afternoon. So congratulations for all of us for sticking it through and being here. We thank you for that. My name is Alex Fallon. I'm the newly appointed CEO of Sparrowhawk Economic Development. I think we are officially the newest Indigenous ECDEV Corp in Saskatchewan. We represent Papikasis First Nations. So we recently settled a land claim and also recently purchased Temple Garden Spa in Moose Jaw. So we're kind of a startup that owns a historic large hotel. So it's an interesting role to be in.
Hello, my name is Grant Humphrey. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Spirit Healthcare Group. We're owned by the 7 tribal councils of Manitoba, which represents 52 of the communities that we report to. The company has been around. It was Tribal Council Investment Group of Manitoba. It was founded in 1989, and it was the epitome of Indigenous success. We climbed to a $100 million company, and then we hit some turbulence at 40,000 feet and came down quite a few notches. So when the new board was brought on and the new CEO was appointed, the company totally changed its focus to healthcare. I think everyone in this room can agree that the healthcare that the Indigenous folks that we represent receive in Canada is substandard. So Heather Berthollet decided to invest all of our time and money in the healthcare of the folks we represent. So we purchased a distance care pharmacy, and we provide all the prescriptions to the 17 northern communities in Manitoba, and we provide medical supplies and equipment to all 63 communities in Manitoba.
Yeah, perfect for that introduction. It goes along with the theme of today is just journey together to economic prosperity. And I just want to put in the clarity, the word prosperity. And I just love that word because being in the economic development position for your community or your organization to be prosperous, that's going back to the community. It affects it in a social aspect, in an educational aspect, in a youth aspect, and what these guys are doing up here today definitely kind of impacts that also. I just want to thank you for that. And we'll start off with the first question here. So we'll start with Mark and then we'll kind of go around here. So where have you found opportunities in economic development, whether it be within your respective provinces, maybe province-wide, Canada-wide?
Well, I've been on the job for about 10 months and I've looked at the history of the corporation, and I guess it's basically focused on the opportunity at BHP. They got a 5-year timeline to build that mine, and so we've been forming partnerships, and we've had some successful ones so far where we've generated quite a bit of income. We're still developing those partnerships. We're also moving into the operations of mine, which they tell us will operate for 80 years. So that's perfect because Fishing Lake's still going to be there 80 years from now. And hopefully they'll be able to benefit along with the other nations in the area. We've looked outside that. We have some land acquisition that we've done in close to the city, some in Yorkton, Saskatoon. We got a project right in the town of Wadena. We're looking at a small hotel project there. Yeah, we've started to, me and my assistant Jaylene have looked at some agricultural opportunities. We also looked into the tourism. So those are just kind of in their infancy, but the other partnerships are the ones where we're going to try and generate as much capital as we can so that we can invest and get more equity positions into businesses. So right now we're just trying to figure out where we fit and what is the best fit for Fishing Lake, and then we'll focus our efforts once we boil that down and figure out where we fit the best.
Perfect. We'll pass it on to you, Alex.
Well, that's the kind of question or issue that really honestly kind of stresses me out a little bit starting this job, because that's the challenge. How do you find economic opportunity, especially for a new ECDEV Corp? And so Papikasis has a very interesting history. I won't go into the details, but I would encourage you to check that out. And in my first board meeting, one of my board members said, Alex, you're really kind of privileged to be in this position. You are literally standing on the shoulders of people who have suffered, but also persevered. And that's one of the most touching things I'd heard. And then it's like, so how do we create opportunity and jobs for this great nation? And when I think about that, yes, we have to do investments in some of the key sectors that we've talked about today. in Saskatchewan. But where my mind goes is, we need to be entrepreneurs and start our own businesses for sure. But then also we need to look beyond kind of the key sectors in Saskatchewan, beyond Western Canada. We need to think nationally. We need to think internationally. There's no reason why Sparrowhawk Papicasis can't be a major player in Saskatchewan, in Canada, and international. And I would love for us to be in the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, whatever, for some big investment or business development opportunity that will create wealth for generations to come. That's our goal. And if we're going to do that for generations to come, we got to go bigger than big, right? So that's the job, I guess, is looking for those opportunities that are going to be, history changing and life changing.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And we're going to jump in a little bit further down the road is kind of getting off and kind of starting. And that's something that Alex will kind of elaborate on as well. So we'll pass it on to Grant.
Yeah, when I started at the company, Heather's dream was to, be a supplier of our own medical supplies to the communities we serve. There was no Indigenous company in the space that was manufacturing their own healthcare products. So in around January of 2020, I started working with a good friend I have in China on figuring out which products we could private label and launch. And then lo and behold, COVID hit. So it shut everything down. And, it was left me sitting there saying, okay, when something bad happens, you've got to try to find a silver lining, try to find something that maybe you can do something with. And the province of Manitoba, I'm sure the province of Saskatchewan and right across Canada and the world, PPE was a huge issue. So we sourced 1 million isolation gowns for the province of Manitoba. We sourced 650,000 digital thermometers for the federal government, for Ontario and Quebec. And we decided that in order to protect the 63 communities in Manitoba, we should supply family safety kits. So in those family safety kits, we put masks, digital thermometers, hand sanitizer, bar of soap. And, that consumed me for probably 6 months, getting all of those things into Canada. So even though it put the main project that we were focusing on, it gave us an opportunity it was the first time an Indigenous company helped the province of Manitoba, fix a serious issue that they had. So instead of us being a patient of the healthcare system, we actually helped the government of Manitoba to protect the rest of the population. So that's what I would have to share.
Yeah, for sure. And through these experiences and kind of these opportunities that you guys have found, can you just speak on some of the barriers or maybe shortcomings that you guys have gone through and kind of overcome throughout the time? Maybe we could start with you, Mark, and maybe any supports or resources that maybe improve these shortcomings or barriers.
The biggest barrier that I've encountered so far is just making the connections with the people that fit with our idea of how we want to run our business, right? And you get a lot of people knocking at your door when you have these opportunities, right? And then you have to sift through those offers, right? And making sure that these people, like I say, fit our idea. And we've met quite a few, and then some of them fell by the wayside, and some people were just there for the short term. We've got some good long-term partners right now. As far as the barriers go, the biggest barrier, I think, is getting, especially in a small community, is finding people to take on the roles that we have. Like now, as we're growing, started out as a one-man operation. The other thing was run by one of the board members, and then finding the human capital to expand and do the roles so that you can expand quickly or react quickly to the offers that are out there. It's a tough thing to do because you have to digest a lot of material, a lot of ideas, a lot of different propositions that people are making to you. And lots of times you just don't have the time. So, one of the first things I realized when I was at Fishing Lake for a little while, I told Chief Sunshine, I said, I think the biggest shortage we have right here right now is human capital. And I can see that at even running the band itself. And if you start getting a bunch of businesses together and you start running those, it's going to be, I think the biggest challenge is going to be the human resource factor, right? I mean, you can have $1 million in the bank, but if you don't have nobody to take and do the job, then what's the point of having these businesses, right? So that's the biggest thing I think challenging for me right now is developing a human resource strategy to be able to take advantage of all these job opportunities that we're going to have in the near future. So that's the next step for us. So.
I think for me, the easy answer here would be to say, Sparrowhawk is a new economic development corporation. Yes, we own a hotel, but we're new. It may be a hard place to go, but I think to be very honest, being new to this role, I'm literally, I think 8 weeks in, is it really comes down to, people, relationships, and trust. Right. And so I met my chief and counselors after I'd been hired. I think maybe one of them was in on the interviews. And that's if you've ever been in one of those meetings, that's an interesting meeting, right? Is you're meeting the chief and counselors of Pegasus Cree Nation, and you're the new CEO of their ECDev Corp. And they're like, who are you? And I'm like, who are you? It's this like, and it's the people that come into it, and I think some of us can relate to this. I grew up in a place, a time where, I can remember my grandma, bless her soul. There's a kid on my street. His name was Jason, and we both went to the same school. We both walked home together. We rode our BMX bikes and we played together. And I talked about this friend, Jason. This was before, Facebook and Instagram and all these things. And I remember one day, Jason came to my house to kind of play. He knocked on the door. So, Alex, can you play today? And my grandma was like, Alex, you can't play with that kid. That's literally what she said. And we know the reasons why, right? Racism and Saskatchewan at the time. And so, coming from this dynamic and then being in this type of role, I'm sure, there's definitely that lack of trust, especially when you're new, especially when you're unknown, you don't know them. And in my first few weeks on the job, actually my first few days, there was a lot of negative comments or criticism, right? I got emails and heard things, and it was like, who's this guy? And so that's difficult. So that's the biggest challenge in my role. I've got confidence in myself and in the board and chief and council that, we're going to get through that. We'll build the relationship slowly, and, we'll climb that mountain. But that relationship, that people side, the trust side is harder than any business deal, I've probably ever done. So.
Yeah, from our standpoint, when the pandemic hit, a lot of companies had to shut down. A lot of companies had to lay off staff. Because we had a distant care pharmacy, we still had to get those medicines to the folks in northern Manitoba that needed them. So fortunately for us, we were able to continue. I guess one barrier that I ran into was, I won $16 million in business, but I had to go to my CFO and say, okay, things have changed in Canada. You can't put 50% down in China and then pay the other 50% when the goods are ready to ship. You had to pay the full 100% upfront. So we had a great relationship with our bank, CIBC, but my CFO looked at me and said, how well do you know this guy in China? Because we were sending him 9 million USD. It's like, well, I've known him for 22 years. I trust him with my life. He's a good, honest person. Don't worry about it. We'll be fine. So that was a small barrier. And we had to, discuss that with the bank as well, because the bank saying, okay, you need to have a line of credit to fund it. And then you've got to collect the money from your client. We also were a little bit lucky with the province. They agreed to pay some of the funds up front. But it also showed us that because COVID shut everything down, we're a 17% owner of the largest Indigenous travel agent, Indigenous Travel in Winnipeg. and their business was just starting, and then it basically crashed to nothing because all the flights were shut down. There was couldn't leave the country, you couldn't go into another country. So because we had some success, we were able to, put more money into that company just so they could keep the doors open.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I just want to jump back to one point that I think is very important, and just how do you navigate that that trust kind of with the First Nation coming in as a non-community member? Because it is definitely tough shoes to fill, and kind of just like you said, there's a whole community behind you kind of relying on you. And with that, I see it all the time across not just Saskatchewan, but Alberta, Manitoba as well. And economic development, sometimes you don't have the internal capacity and you have to go outside your community kind of to bring somebody in and kind of assist in that. So how do you guys deal with that? Start with Alex. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm just facing that right now. So it's on my mind for sure. And it's difficult, truth be told. I'd been the CEO of Saskatoon Economic Development Authority for 8 years before this role. Been there a long time. We were having great success, comfortable role. I knew what I was doing, things were good. And so there was a bit of fear to kind of step into this role, step into the weight and importance of this role. And, but you take it. And I think what can get you through that is three things. One is what I call UD, which is understandably difficult. We know why it's going to be difficult for all these reasons: the relationship, the community, the business environment, but understandably so. So it's going to be difficult. Climbing Everest is difficult, but when you do it, it's pretty amazing, the view from the top. So going into it with that mindset has definitely helped me. I think also having confidence in yourself, if I can say it, is like, I'm going to do my absolute best. It might not work out. I think it will, but as long as I do my absolute best, that's really all I can do. And the rest is up to, you can't do more than your best. So it's knowing it's difficult, it's giving your best, and then having trust in the team around you, the board, chief and council, the community, everyone in this room. You just got to make it happen.
Mark, Grant, do you have any insight on?
I guess I'm lucky. I didn't really feel any pressure of being an outsider. When I joined the company, I was welcome for some of the experiences I had in business in the different sales positions that I've held over the years. I think the fact that we were successful in getting the PPE that all of our 63 communities needed, I think that gave me a lot of credibility, because we did fill a void where, when masks were needed and hand sanitizer was needed, we filled that void. I was born in England, so I came from the country that colonized Canada. And so that weighs at the back of my mind every day as well, that this is my opportunity to, try to help improve the healthcare of the 63 communities in Manitoba.
For me, coming from a different First Nation and going into Fishing Lake was, it wasn't challenging. I was welcomed there by my friend, and he introduced me to most of the people there that were working within the band office and some of the community members on the outside of it. But I think the biggest thing is just being visible, letting people know what your plan is, being transparent. When anybody asks you what you're doing there, make sure you tell them, what you can provide and what you're trying to provide for the community, and keep in your mind that your job is there, supporting, and you're working for the community. Whoever that member is, you're not working for the band office, you're not working for the chief and council, you're working for the community. And Chief Sunshine has always told me that, like, whenever I listen to him, he always keeps community first thing in his mind. As an example, we had a partner come out, and he wanted to meet the chief. So he came, we had a meeting, and we're all sitting around, and he says, the money's not the thing. He says, when I want a partner, I want a partner to be invested in my community and know what my community is about. And he said, if you want to get to know us, that's what I think you should do. And he says, we have a fishing derby, ice fishing derby coming up in 2 weeks. And, if you want to really show that you're going to be a committed partner, maybe you should be there. And so we're riding back and going for lunch after, and he goes, do you think I should go to the fishing derby? And I go, well, Chief Sunshine's only going to tell you once. If you don't come, well, I don't think you'll be welcome back. I said, so he's given you the idea, he's planted the seed, and he's told you what you should do. And if you want to take that for whatever you want, but what I've learned is that if he says something, you should do it. So that's just the way it was, right? So yeah, I think that's the main thing, is getting to know the community. There's always going to be naysayers, right? Because there's always a negative aspect of what you're doing. Just make sure that you're honest with them as you are with everybody else, and they can take it for whatever they want, right? So.
Yeah, perfect for that. And it just preaches to the power of showing up and showing face in the community. You know, if there is some recommendations that Chief gives as an external partner coming in, it is important for most communities if you show up and if you show face. You know, we come out of a time now, a lot of Zoom calls and phone calls, but I know from a leadership perspective within First Nations, they value, and when you show up at the band offices, when you show up at community events. So it definitely does speak powerful. And kind of with that, Grant, you spoke on it, but how do you navigate kind of through the ups and downs of businesses and kind of rolling with the punches throughout COVID? Maybe you could touch on that with group.
Wow, that's a tough one. I think it's been said a few times today, perseverance, that you've just got to get up in the morning, you've got to figure out what you need to get done that day, and you've just got to do it. When we got the big contract for 1 million isolation gowns, the province of Manitoba chartered Air Canada Boeing 777, flew it to Shanghai. I had my crew loaded with 150,000 isolation gowns, and we flew it to Winnipeg, and everyone was super impressed and super happy that we did what we said we could do. And then the question was, well, when's the next shipment coming? And I said, well, it should be ready in about 10 days. I got a call, it seemed like hours after the province asked, when's the next shipment? And my friend in China informed me that the Chinese government had shut that factory down and were no longer allowing it to export around the world. They needed all the isolation gowns from themselves. I'm sitting there going, holy crap, I just got a $9 million contract. I've only filled, 15,000 of these things. And then we had to scramble. Luckily I have a partner that I trusted in China, and he was able to secure another supplier. And originally when I took the first sample of the gown in, it was yellow. When the first shipment arrived in Winnipeg, it was blue. So the province immediately said, well, what the hell? You showed me yellow, why you give me blue? And I said, well, they ran out of yellow polypropylene in China. We're on to blue. So when the next shipment arrived, it was a mix of yellow and blue. And it was totally different than the first gown. So I thought, oh my God, this is not going to go over well. And sure enough, as soon as the province saw it, they came back and said, what the hell are you playing at, Humphrey? It's a different gown. And I said, well, you've got to appreciate the fact the entire world is searching for these isolation gowns. So I had to do some due diligence on it. I had to do some tests. When you're talking isolation gowns, no moisture can go through the shoulder seams or the ties. I sat outside on my deck, had my wife spray me down with the garden hose. And then I'm looking underneath, seeing if my t-shirt's wet, because I knew that's the first thing the provinces do is going to be to test the quality. So I think just being resilient, and as things come up, you've just got to look around and say, how do I fix the problem? And luckily, the province approved the gowns, and then we just started shipping them every 10 days.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. And kind of jumping back to some things that you spoke on, Alex, being in a new role here. So how do you kind of provide some insight in the process of starting up, an economic development arm for a First Nation, and kind of being a brand new development arm here in Saskatchewan? It feels like the world is kind of your oyster and it's kind of wide open. How do you make sure that you focus on a few things and get them done?
Yeah, there's so much to do in the first few months, right? So managing expectations is key for sure, but we're working on that. I think what I can bring to the discussion in this new role, new organization, is this kind of, the herd mentality, right? The herd is a very safe, protective place to be, and that's where everyone is, and you want to be there. But there are times where you've got to kind of leave that group think to go try something else. And anytime you do that, people look at you like, oh, you're crazy, or you don't know what you're doing. But I think, for a Sparrowhawk to kind of catch up and then keep growing, we've got to leapfrog some of these opportunities. Because when I'm in a room and I hear everyone talk about this widget, I write in my book, not that widget, So what's the other widget? I don't know. But that opens your eyes to thinking about it, and you kind of go there. So as an example, uranium sector, great sector, tons of business there, and there will be forever. So I'm just hypothetical example. I used to work at Cameco, so love the industry. But there's also a company in British Columbia called General Fusion, started by 1 or 2 people, and their goal is to do nuclear energy without uranium, right? And so when this company said, we're going to do this, everyone looked at them like, fusion's impossible. You'll never do it. You're in Vancouver. You're a scientist. You don't have money. Forget about it. We're doing this. That company, and I know because I worked for them for a short time, it has now raised, I think it's about $400 million. Jeff Bezos, other investors have invested in this company, and all the impossible scientific milestones that they were told were impossible, they've started moving along this, right? So it always reminds me of the classic Blockbuster Video Netflix discussion, right? And so what is that Blockbuster Netflix discussion in Saskatchewan? If these are all the things we're doing, what's that thing that no one else is doing that you can go to? So, you still need that. You need that mix of risk, right? Someone I think said, go to where the risk is, or something like that. You need that stability. You need those type of investments. And we have those, but then you also have to kind of look at leapfrogging to grow.
Yeah, exactly. And Mark, do you have some info on that as well? I know you guys have a great opportunity with BHP as well, and kind of just maximizing that. How do you figure out kind of what to put your focus on and maximize your efforts?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge right now, right? I mean, it's a short window. It seems like, 5 years is a long time, but it's not when you're talking about partnerships and stuff. Sometimes it takes a year to formalize a partnership, and then that opportunity for that phase of the construction is gone, right? So I think we have enough in place right now to capitalize on what we've got. Now we have to look forward to operations, see how we can get into the mine for that long period of time, and try and focus on that and see how we can make that work, right? And then gain the capital that we're hoping to generate from these opportunities at BHP, and then take that and invest that in businesses. Maybe it's, something in the sector that Alex had just talked about, but that'll be probably the biggest challenge for myself and the staff and the board and the community to figure out what business fits best for them and how they can get the biggest bang for their buck, as they say, right? So that it has the biggest impact at the nation, and everybody, not everybody, but a lot of the people can benefit from it, right? Whether it's jobs or, the training that goes into it and long-term thinking, right? So, we're trying to get into that situation where we're not just the janitors and the laborers at these places, right? We want people to move forward, and we want them to be able to shoot for, the admin jobs and the CEO jobs, right? My goal is to have somebody from the community take this job over and make sure that they keep it running in the right way, right? So we're developing strategies, we're putting things in place and processes in place so that the next person that comes along can have success with this company, right? I mean, and that's the main thing, making sure that it's feasible and it's repeatable and it's able to just keep doing what we're doing. And I'm sure there's going to be, there's going to be some mistakes. And my assistant said, well, how do you know this guy's not scamming you and stuff? And I said, well, you got to develop a BS meter, right? Because, there are going to be people that are going to come to you and try and sell you the next best widget, but it's not worth nothing. It's never going to go nowhere. And you have to figure that out. And that's going to come with experience, right? And hopefully we gain enough in the next little while that we do put the money in the right places and the community be better for it. So.
Yeah, perfect for that. I just want to touch on one thing you said, and with that internal and kind of band capacity, how do each of you, I guess, envision that for your respective kind of communities and businesses, whether it be taking a band member and kind of mentoring them throughout the years, or a succession plan to kind of take over the band economic development arm? I know you touched on some processes in place, but kind of how do you go about that? Yeah.
We've started right now. We've got an HR strategy in place where we're working with all the employment parts within the band, POSEC, social assistance, labor force development, and the HR people that are there now. And we know we're going to have all these jobs available to us from our partners, whether they're direct partners or they're BHP people or BHP opportunities. So we have to make sure that we access as much training that is being offered right now and find the people that are capable enough or willing enough to take on these roles and expose them to enough different, whether it's trades or administration part of it. One of our partners is EMS. So I already talked about maybe doing some fire training. If we can find the right person that wants to go and take that fire training, then he can give them the exposure to the trade, and maybe they'll ladder up and be part of that company, or maybe they go work for City of Regina as a fireman or a fire person, right? So we got to find those people, and that's the biggest challenge for us right now, right? I mean, we've got but Fishing Lake has 1,800 members, and I think 1,300 of them are roughly urban, right? So now the strategy is trying to find these people and present these opportunities to them so that they can say, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to be that fire person, or I want to go work as a crane operator, or these kind of different things, or I want to become a journeyman carpenter. So that's the challenge for us right now. And hopefully we get enough opportunities with our partners, and the community realizes the opportunities that are there. And like we're having a career fair here next week, and hopefully we can bring enough of those things and get some ideas from the community. So, yeah.
I think for me, it comes down to a photo I have on my phone. And so it's kind of the vision and then the promise. So that first meeting I had with chief and council, and some of our board members were there too, I think, we took a photo in the lobby of all of us. And what I said, promise to the group was 4 years from that day, we are going to gather in the exact same place and take the same photo. And some of the people might be different. That's what the team and it's all about. But those people have been along for the journey. So that photo, and I have it in my office on the wall. 4 years later, we're going to stand there. And my goal was to be able to stand up in front of that group and say, we did it, right? That was our first meeting. Sparrowhawk was brand new. And we said, this is what we want to do. And my goal is to stand in front of that group in 4 years and say, we did it, and here's some success stories, and prove it. And then ideally for me would be then, and I'm done, right? There's someone else there to take over the role. I think it was the ladies panel who talked about it, right? Is you got to chase that change. You got to develop people. You got to bring someone along, and you can't be scared of that change. So, in 4 years, if we achieve that objective, and if there's someone else is ready for that role from the community, and that's what the board and the community want, then that to me would be, probably the biggest success story of my career to be able to do that. So that's what we want to do.
For us, we've focused completely on Manitoba for the last 4 years that I've been with the company. The goal now is to take the 50 private label medical supplies that we've brought into the company, is to expand that across Canada. Saskatchewan is probably, very close to us. We're going to move west. We've also got Northwestern Ontario. In order to do that, I need a salesperson. So we have a young man starting Monday morning. We're going to groom him. We're going to let him do pick and packing to look at the products. He's going to fill orders. We're going to kind of get him into some of the purchasing so he can see that side of the business. And then it's actually take them out on the road with myself, show them how I go about doing a sales call and then getting them involved. Ideally, I'd love to have, 3 or 4 reps out on the road. I think that will take time, but that's one of the main goals. We just had the opportunity to bid on a large tender for home care beds. There's a number of home care manufacturers in Canada that sell electric home care beds. That opportunity came up and the bid came out with, it was basically you had to supply the bed that they wanted. There was no substitutions allowed for it at all. Turned out after the bid came out that they found out that that company is in receivership, that they've said, we want this bed. So then it gave us the opportunity, can we find another bed in time? So the last couple of weeks, I focused a lot of the time figuring out another bed. So the bid's gone in and I'm very excited that we have the opportunity to win that. And then we'll have a Spirit Healthcare bed and then I can go national. So a home care bed is something that all of our elders need, our parents need. My mother just had to have one of last year. And, that will give us the opportunity to take our business nationally. But to do that, I need salespeople. So that's the next big challenge, is to find that perfect young person.
Yeah. And I guess from my experiences too, so I've been going into my 6th year with WLCS, and I remember at first, pre-COVID, human capacity was still kind of an issue. So we were having to go 3 or 4 of us in our senior management group, go onto the reserve and go door to door and look for environmental monitors that wanted to take our curriculum. And sometimes that's what you need to do as an economic development arm is get out there and be boots on the ground and kind of bang door to door. I'm sure there's many people that can relate to that. And with the human capacity component, some First Nations do have great capacity, but on the other hand, kind of coming out of COVID, it's hard to find people who want to work and who will stay committed. And I think everybody can relate to that right now. And when you do find a good person, it's hard to keep on to them because everybody kind of wants to pull them left and right. And you have to make sure that you're there. So with that, is there any snippets or kind of successes that you guys would like to share kind of before we go into a question period here? And some last closing comments?
One I can share because it just happened last week was we were at Temple Garden Hotel and Spa. So Sparrowhawk Pepix's first investment. And sidebar, I would encourage you to go to the hotel. We are doing a multi-million-dollar renovation to bring it up to world-class standards. So if you've been there before, you probably know it needed some TLC. And pleased to say that Pepicus and Sparrowhawk are investing in that. Thanks to First Nations Bank of Canada for helping us. But we're doing that, so visit there. Whilst we were there last week, the manager of the hotel gave us a tour of some of the renovation rooms. So we went to see 12 rooms that have been demolished. They're taping, mudding, and all that kind of stuff. And we were going through the fire exit back to the meeting room. And it actually was just me going down back to the meeting room. And this young gentleman, he's going up the stairs and he's got kind of, painting overalls on and stuff. And I said, hey, are you from Pepicus? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, awesome. Like, how'd you get this job? It started chatting and he said it was advertised on the Pepicus app. There's an app for the jobs. And I was like, well, that's what it's all about, right? Is you see the end result, which is a great young guy. He was a mudder and taper who's working in Pepicus now, has a job working on renovations at a historic multi-million-dollar hotel. He's doing that work. We got talking. His wife had passed away. He's a single dad. He's got a little girl, and he was just so thankful for that job, right? And that job has been created by the community, partnerships, the business, Sparrowhawk, and others, the community. And that's what it's all about. So we kind of swap photos or phone numbers. And he texted me later and he said, oh, Alex, great to meet you. Like, thanks for that. And I introduced him to a couple of the board members and it was great. And he goes, we should go for a swim time sometime in the hotel. And I was like, That'd be awesome. So, I felt like I met someone who, you just see the results of your work.
For us, when, I hate to say that, I keep talking about the medical supplies, but when we got the big contract for the isolation gowns, the head of purchasing for the WRHA, I went in there, gave him a sample of the product. He said, "Can you give me a price?" I gave him a price. He said, "That's crazy. It's way too much." And then I said, "Well, how many do you need?" He said, "I need 1,000,000 gowns." So I went back home, got a better price from the factory, and then it was great. What you don't realize sometimes is the person that you're dealing with today might go to another company and have a career change themselves. So this same gentleman that gave us this massive contract, he went and he left the government of Manitoba and started working at a company called Precision ADM. The chairman of the board of that company and the CEO, they really take economic reconciliation to heart. And Jay Singh, the purchaser that actually gave us the business, brought our company to their attention. And now we have a partnership with this company. They've developed the first compostable ASTM level 3 surgical mask. Every blue mask that you see a person wearing for the last 2 years, that's made out of spun-blown polypropylene plastic. Each one of those little 4 by 6 inch pieces of mouth and nose covers going to be in the landfill for 450 years. So this company approached us, said, would you be willing to, work with us? Would you be willing to sell our product into your Indigenous markets? So we now have an exclusive to a compostable surgical mask. It's an ASTM level 3. And if you throw it into the landfill, 3 months from now, you'll only have an aluminum noseband. So it's very strange sometimes, people that you meet and you deal with in one part of your life, they can come back, 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. So I always say, keep an open mind, never burn a bridge, and always be willing to listen to other folks and other ideas. And that was an example that worked out very well for us.
For me, I think we were working with the store. They have a small store out at Fishing Lake. It's right on the highway. And one of our first tasks was finding a manager, because the manager that was there at the time was backed off and just working part-time. And we need to find somebody, and they'd done some searches for people and couldn't get nobody to come out there. And it's a small community. And if you're not from the area, you're not really going to stick around, right? It's like trying to find doctors for rural Saskatchewan, same idea, right? So then me and my assistant Jaylene put our heads together and said, well, there's got to be somebody working at this store that can handle this job, right? So we started interviewing. We asked, put a little poster up, said, who wants to be the store manager? Who has the drive to do that, right? So we got 3 people applied, and we interviewed him. So, okay, you're going to work at the store. You 3 will be supervisors, kind of assistant supervisors, and we'll see who rises to the top. And after about a month and a half, 2 months, we selected the one guy to go into training and figure this out and see if he had the wherewithal to keep moving forward. And he did. He grabbed it, and people were saying, you're not going to find people from the community to do this job. They don't have the skills and things like this. There's a lot of negative stuff. And even when we hired this guy, but he's grabbed a hold of it, and he's done a really good job. Right. And we're really happy. It's taken a burden off ourselves that the store is moving forward and we're getting processes in place, and he just seized it. Right. And from a guy that was just kind of floating around being a cashier and stuff, now he's got this opportunity, and he's become the manager of the store. And I told him, I said, this could be a stepping stone. You could go manage lots of other things. You don't know where this is going to end for you, right? So, and he's happy and he's personable, and the staff really like him. Where there was a really negative atmosphere within the store, now there's a positive one, and people are working hard there, and they're taking pride in their work. So I'm really proud of him and happy that he's taken this opportunity and proved that he could do the job. So.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It just preaches to the power of opportunity, and giving opportunity. You never know how it's going to work out, and it may look not too bad off the start, but it turns out very great and a success story. So thank you for that. We do have 10 minutes left for a question period here. So if there's any questions from the audience here, you could just raise your hand and we'll get you a mic. Don't be shy.
Hello? Yeah, that's it. I got a question for Alex. So somebody at the Peaksies was actually negative towards you at some point in time?
No, I don't think it was at the band. So if I knew who, well, no, it just, people question, right? Why this person? I don't know him. And I had a bit of that. So, some were anonymous, just little digs. And it was a bit of a, it's strange moment, but that maybe comes with the role. So you got to be thick skinned and you got to prove people that you can do it, and then hopefully they come around.
I think that's kind of rare, because I think most First Nations, they all get along. They love every decision that's made by chief and council. So I don't know what's wrong with the Peaksies. So
Yeah. I think everybody in the room possibly has ran into an instance or two, especially involved with Indigenous business or politics, and kind of keeping it at arm's reach. So yeah, thank you guys for that. If there's no questions, we'll wrap up our panel, and thank you for giving us the time to share with you, and we appreciate that.
All right, hello, there we go. Thank you so much to our panelists and moderator. You guys did such a great job and appreciate you making time today. Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that, like, I appreciate and the honest approach and being transparent when you are working in communities you are not from. So I definitely take that to heart, and that's kind of my approach to work as well, is just being open and honest and transparent and being consistent. As some of the nations will know, I am very persistent and consistent with my emails. So just got to give them the information and they take what they want from that. So thank you guys for talking on that subject. And I also just wanted to make note that, we need to support one another, and there's endless opportunities in the world, in Saskatchewan, and, in our nations and communities. So let's support one another, and let's eliminate the lateral violence that goes on, that we've at least have experienced once or more in our lifetime. So let's support each other and help each other out. That's what this whole forum is about, is to network and connect and hear everyone and be able to move forward in a good way and support one another. So with that, since we got extra time for our break, we are going to show a short video from the Ministry of Trade and Export Development, one of our major sponsors today. So we will go into that after I thank all of our sponsors and our partner, Indigenous Services Canada, and our sponsors, Skyline, the Mosaic Company, Ministry of Trade and Export Development, Graham Construction, Tourism Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan Indian Equity Foundation, Blue Earth Renewables, D3H Hotels, Economic Development, Pinter and Associates Limited, First Nations Bank of Canada, PCL Industrial Management, Inc., Edwards School of Business, Avanti Office Products, and last but not least, again, Business Development Bank of Canada. We'll go into the video, and then we'll go into a longer break, and then we'll come back and hear more from our keynote at 3:15. I don't know where we're at for time, but you'll know when I come back to the stage is when we're going to get started again. So we'll play the video and break.